Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today, I'm going to try and put together what we know about the Bob mod, otherwise known as literally every FNF mod ever, in order to understand the lore. You'll be quite surprised by the amount of lore this joke mod has. But before I can get into that, thank you for 143,000 subscribers. We are so close to 150,000. Somehow though, 80% of you are not subscribed. So if any part of this video is informative, please consider subscribing. Okay, let's get started. So the Bob mod was initially just 1 week with 3 songs. The whole mod itself was simply mocking the week 6 formula, or rather the witty formula, that a large majority of notable mods seem to use. You know, character is normal in the first song, gets angry, and then turns into a literal demon. It's what has come to be expected in mods, let's be honest. Bob, of course, follows this formula in order to make fun of it, starting out with a happy tune with a sunny background known as Sunshine. After that, we get into Livid. Bob is irritated at Boyfriend because he said he looked like Dream.
These nuts.
Now, if this mod is meant to be literally every FNF mod ever, I suppose the stereotype must be that the second song is always a banger, because Vivid is just that. Anyways, after that we get Run. This song is absolutely ridiculous. It perfectly exaggerates the insane nature that the last song in mods often have, as well as overcharting that many mods have in either all of the songs or just the last. Bob has been transformed into this creepy form with eyes that either move erratically or stare at the player. Quite strange. When the song quote-unquote ends, you can't really beat it. The game will crash and your default browser will automatically open to a page repeating the phrase, "Bob is mad," with the creepy Bob with eyes at the top of the page. There's nothing really meaningful to this. And that was that. It was safe to assume that Bob was just a one-off joke mod with an eerie ending. Oh. Well, it seems Bob wasn't quite done with Boyfriend, as he makes his return in Bob's Onslaught. This second part to the mod is a continuation from the events of Run, as we see Boyfriend and Girlfriend teleported away. And then Girlfriend makes a comment on the monstrosity they had just witnessed. Ron shows up, a strange guy with a folder for his head. His song is kind of a joke, it being full of sound effects from ironic memes. When his song ends, Ron is killed. Bob has returned, but something is wrong. He appears to be his normal self, but the strange form with realistic eyes seems to cover him like slime, as if this strange form from Run was caused by the substance. We are soon going to understand more about what this is, but first we need to get through the rest of Bob's Onslaught. The song featuring Bob's strange form is known as Trouble. In this song we see the substance acting as a part of Bob, the eye moving as it did in Run. The dialogue has another dream moment, referencing the time when he totally did not cheat. The song ends with Boyfriend glitching out, just like how Run ends. The difference is that the game doesn't crash this time. After Trouble, we enter Onslaught. Bob is pretty pissed at Boyfriend at this point. Boyfriend says he still do be looking like Dream, which of course leads to this. Anyways, after finally beating the insanity of Onslaught, you are greeted with Bob accepting defeat. and then there is a loud beep accompanied by static with a white figure stretched in front of it. In front of that, there is a link to a Google Drive. This is where actual outer lore is finally introduced in the Bob mod, so let's get into that. Bob seems to be much more than we may have thought. The Onslaught update has been out for a bit, so many of you have likely seen this Google Drive. However, you likely don't fully understand what all of this means, or just haven't bothered to check it out. That's why I'm here to explain it. I'll start by going through each thing in this folder, and then I'll get into the recently provided extra information from the devs themselves. Starting out with this pink slip, which seems to be firing someone known as Lennon for having a strange group in his office, as well as for AI experiments. Next we have Lennon's writings, a documentation of events from 2019. There are quite a few things to make note of here, so I'll go through it all. Lennon's wife, Jane, is convinced Lennon has gone insane. It isn't just Jane who thinks he is crazy, everyone he knows thinks the same. The goo is mentioned again, as well as the AI. Lennon praises the AI for being smart, having a desire to bring it to his realm. Something to note is that this entry is the same as the pink slip's termination date. 3 months later, it seems Lennon's experiments have gone too far, and now someone is after him to likely put a stop to it. He says that Bob can take over if need be. At this point, it's safe to assume that the AI is Bob. A month later, Lennon repeatedly says it has to work, ending his statement with again saying Bob can take it from here. The rest of the pages are torn out. Unfortunately, there is no way of us knowing why or how, for now at least. Anyways, next up we have Dear Lennon. This is basically Jane just saying she misses Lennon. The date listed at the bottom is the 18th of June, the day before Lennon made an entry in his writings saying things didn't go well with Jane, so that links those events together. This one is quite interesting, the Noah family's spending history. I'll go through each documented purchase here. Things start out normal, with a deck of cards, online image sharing, and crayons. On the 12th of March, Lennon starts making purchases for work over time. General work supplies, cloud storage, and text storage. Those could be shrugged off, nothing really strange going on there. Then, Lennon buys several buckets, and then the next day, pays for some kind of book or article on how to clean carpets to deal with a liquid accident at work. This is just before Lennon is fired for the strange goo and AI experiments, according to the date. Obviously, this means the goo, which was kept in the bucket, somehow ended up on the carpets, and needed a serious clean. So much so, Lennon spent money on what was likely a more professional method to cleaning carpets. Regardless of this, we still know he was caught, being fired the next day. Anyways, Lennon is blocked from making purchases after the goo incident, and then on the day that Lennon is fired, his wife Jess purchases a camera for simply documenting. It's likely this documenting was basically just keeping a watch on Lennon and filming his strange activities. Moving along, we have Jane's drawing, this being made by Lennon and Jess's daughter, Jane. This obviously is just a depiction of the Noah family. There is another Jane-related document, it being Jane learning the alphabet and such. Nothing out of the ordinary. There is one little noteworthy thing about Jane, however. The file name for the image of the stretched white figure with static behind them is Jane in all caps. Bit odd. Next up is unknown.png. We see a splattered mess of paint, the black paint having depictions of eyes, and a very poorly written Bob. This basically tells us the goo is the black substance that gives Bob realistic eyes and I guess elevated power. We see Bob half covered with it in trouble, it clearly being a liquid and not a part of Bob himself. Anyways, when Bob took over for Lennon, he must have made use of the goo for himself. Next, we have a strange audio that is just a jumbled mess of beeping, it being called Plant. This is likely meaningless, and the only thing it could really possibly mean is Bob, the AI, being planted into a system, thus the file name Plant. Here we have a file that just repeats the letter D many times. the image itself being a very squished image of a URL. This URL is Lennon Noah We Watched Laugh. If we go there, we see this image. This is likely Lennon here on the top, alongside with what could be his house at the bottom. We see We Watched Laugh on top of the image of Lennon. This is likely people laughing at Lennon for his AI and goop experiments and how crazy they were. Anyways, at the bottom of the page is another URL, this being Jess Noah's page. Here, we find some code that when clicked on, takes us to another audio. Dispatch.
Mike, uniform, Charlie, X-ray, Echo, Peppa, India, Hotel, Alpha, Peppa, Radio, Bravo.
This is a recording using military alphabet, which is basically taking a message and making each letter a word. You decode it by taking the first letter from each word said, which puts it back together. The message here is mostly gibberish, however Pico is repeated 3 times throughout all of the meaningless jumble of letters. This is odd, as this message comes from Jess Noah's page. How could she know who Pico is? I feel like only Lennon or Bob could ever end up encountering Pico or boyfriend, etc. It's even more strange because Bob obviously killed Pico in Run. Okay, one last thing. If you take the We Watched Laugh from the URL of Lennon's page, you are greeted with this. This is a resume of sorts, telling us more about Lennon. It tells us that Lennon is a theoretical physicist who worked as a technical engineer at Lenkel Studios. It's strange though, instead of telling us more about Lennon, the resume tells us how Lenkel Studios shut down due to many cancelled projects, and then someone called John is said to have died in a gas explosion months after the company's closing. This again just adds more confusion to all of this. Who is John? Luckily for us, like I said before, the devs have left an actual explanation to all of this in the drive. Well actually, it isn't really good news. Turns out, this whole thing was just made as a story for people to go mad over, trying to put together all the little details, you know, as a joke. This shouldn't be surprising, as the entirety of the Bob mod never really takes itself seriously, that much is clear. Anyways, unfortunately the mental state of the writer of this story was taking a toll due to the increased popularity of it, and I guess Bob as a whole. It was decided to not take the story any further. It was also said that this whole story isn't canon to Bob's lore, and never really was, I think. Regardless of this, there is still more for me to tell you about. I'll bet most of you are at least kinda hooked to this story, and you'd be in luck if you want to hear more. There is more information here provided that I guess was made for the really dedicated people to find. It says for those who haven't found it, so let's get started with what is presented in this case file. The first document is called Character Profile. It tells us about the 3 members of the Noah family in great detail, so I'll go over each one. Lennon's file, which happens to be the longest, tells us a few things. Lennon was obsessed with his AI Bob, this confirming Bob to be an AI, and he based his entire life around him. He desperately wanted to bring Bob to the real world, attempting to use a strange black liquid to do so. When this didn't work, Lennon thought to use himself as a vessel for Bob to become real. However, this wasn't enough for Lennon. His journal said that he was going to use his whole family as a vessel for Bob, not just himself. Jess and Lennon both went missing after the supposed witness reports. Jess's file tells us that it was concluded for an email report that her relationship with Lennon became rocky upon Bob's creation, as Lennon was so obsessed with Bob and no longer cared for his family. Lastly, we have Jane's file, current status written as comatose and heavily disfigured. The file tells us Jane was taken away by Lennon, only to be returned to the Noah family household days later, covered in a mysterious liquid whilst being heavily disfigured and in a coma. The theory of whoever wrote the file is that Lennon attempted to use Jane as a vessel but failed. Jane is now in hospital. Wow, that is a lot to take in. Before I move on from the character files, there is something I want to point out. The previously mentioned image that appears after Onslaught with the stretched out white figure has the file name Jane, like I said before. It's safe to say that this figure is quite well disfigured. This could maybe be what Jane looked like after the experiment. Just an idea. Anyways, next up we have a dispatch report. I think I'll just read this one out. 911, what is your emergency? Hi, my name is name withheld, and I am very concerned about my husband, Lennon name withheld. He has been acting incredibly strange recently. Okay ma'am, please continue. He has been distancing himself from the family and not showing up to the house until really late at night. And when I confronted him about it, he started rambling like a madman about some sort of breakthrough he was close to getting. What sort of breakthrough? Something about creating living beings out of, I don't know, goop? I'm just worried about what my husband is getting up to. He seems to be going mad. Okay ma'am, would you like us to send a team down to investigate? Yes, please. This gives us an insight into some more events likely leading up to Bob becoming real, as it's mentioned Lennon was convinced he was close to a breakthrough in his plan. Anyways, next we have the investigation report of the dispatch team. They discover the goo and the Bob AI and the torn pages from Lennon's journal. It reads as follows. This has to work. If I can't bring them here alone, they'll need a host. That's it. I must make sacrifices for the future of science. After reading this, the dispatch team determines that Lennon drowned himself in the goo to go hunt down more sacrifices for Bob. Interesting. We are now onto the last file provided, a missing persons report. It says the entirety of the Noah family is missing, which is unsurprising. It then says, according to witness reports, a man has been walking around covered in a black substance. This same figure had made its way to the Noah family residence, and later screaming could be heard. It's pretty obvious what happened here. Lennon, corrupted by the goo, takes Jane as mentioned previously, only to return her after realizing she couldn't be sacrificed properly. So, now we are done, right? That's the full story? Well, there is 2 images in this folder as well. The first is called Symbols. I'm guessing these strange symbols were either in Lennon's journal or perhaps painted on the walls of his little lab. Lastly, there is a witness sketch of the man covered in black substance. This makes it quite clear that Lennon was covered from head to toe in the stuff. Disgusting. Alright, I think I'm finally done. Congratulations on making it to the end of the video. This one was quite long. If you need a refresher on anything I said, I'll leave a link to the original Google Drive, developer explanation, which actually has a full summary of the story on the last page, and the final case file. I must say, this story was quite interesting, considering how it evolved from a silly joke Friday Night Funkin mod. I just wish they had made it canon, because it would make the Bob mod more interesting, in my opinion at least. Well, regardless, I hope you enjoyed today's video. Remember to subscribe if it was informative, and to join the Discord if you want to hang out with the community. That's all from me, thanks for watching. See you in the next one, bye!